Greetings, this is Jim Lindsay. This is a CIS 320 video, and in this video I'll be talking to you about material that's presented in Chapter 4 of the Visio textbook, the step-by-step Microsoft Visio 2013 book. In this chapter we're going to make a number of different kinds of drawings. We're going to start with flow charts, and we're going to make two kinds of flow charts. We'll make a traditional flow chart, and then we'll work our way into what's called a cross-functional flow chart. Both of those are have utility, and you'll get to see the pros and the cons of each of those. When we're done with that, we'll also work on something called an organization chart. I have the files. If you want to download the files from Blackboard, you're going to definitely want the org chart Excel sheet. You're also going to want this photos.zip folder. This is a when you see something called a .zip, what that means that something has been compressed, something large has been squished down. Think of like if you were going on vacation and you had a whole lot of clothing you wanted to bring with you, but you had a pretty small suitcase. You'd have to like really smush it and pack it in there to fit. And when you got to your destination, when you unzipped it, the lid would just about pop off. In order to, all those things inside of it would come bursting out of the suitcase. That's essentially what we're doing with a zip file. In this case, it's a bunch of pictures, a bunch of images of people and their faces. And if you open the photos folder from the link that's available to you from the helpful hyperlinks on Blackboard, you'll see all these different pictures here. And you could download these one by one, which would be really time consuming, or what you could do, you could download this photos.zip folder and put it on your computer. Let's say I just downloaded that, and then from there what I can do, I'm going to double click it, and then I've got this photos folder which was inside of that photos.zip, and I'm going to drag and drop that on my desktop. It takes it a moment to decompress it or unzip it. And now I have this folder of all these different images. That's what you are going to want. Let's take a look at the file sizes of these different items here. If we hover over the top of photos, we'll see that this is, actually just go to its properties. See, it's 4.83 megabytes. Let's see how big it was when it was zipped. It's 4.74. So it reduced it some, not significantly, but the convenience of being able to download one thing and then double click it and then get all your stuff from it makes it well worth the effort to download the zip file and decompress it, as opposed to downloading each one of those individual picture files. So what do you want for this tutorial? Well, get these things that are available from the Chapter 4 folder, primarily that photos.zip. Copy that back in there real quickly, and then extract it. You want this Excel file and so on. So we're going to be working with these files as we complete this tutorial. So let's get to it. All right, let's begin by working with a traditional flowchart. How do you make a traditional flowchart? What is a traditional flowchart? Well, what I'd like for you to do is turn in your book to page 166. And if you turn to page 166, there is a screenshot of what we're going to build. It's the Human Resources Recruiting Process flowchart. And it contains several processes. It contains a document. It contains decisions. It contains a start and an end shape. These are different components that make up or can make up a flowchart. And this particular example is a horizontal flowchart. Basically, things are running horizontally. They can also run vertically. But this is just an example of a picture that shows a process, and that's what a flowchart is. If you work with computer programming, you get into a habit of before you start writing your code, you basically flowchart the process. You think about, okay, I'm trying to solve this particular problem, and in order to solve this particular problem, I would need to think about each one of these different situations, and here's a question I would have to answer, and if the answer was yes, I would need to do this, and if the answer was no, I'd need to do this. And so you get really used to flowcharting in that particular discipline. In other disciplines, you may flowchart as well. In math, maybe But in the business college, unfortunately, we don't spend a tremendous amount of time learning about flow charting, so this is a pretty new topic to most of my students. So let's get into Visio and start this. So how do you start Visio? I'm going to just open up Visio, and you open it however you have it set up on your computer. I'm going to go to File, and for categories, I want to build a flow chart. And in this case, I want to do a basic flow chart, a traditional flow chart. In a moment, we'll come back and we'll work with this cross-functional flow chart, but for right now, we're going to do a basic flow chart. So I'm going to open that up. I'm going to go with US units, and it brings me to the beginning of a blank canvas, if you will. Over here on the left, in the shapes pane, it has different stencils that have to do with flow charts, and I'm going to build my flow chart using the connector tool. And you could drag each one of these shapes and then use a connector tool to individually connect each one of the shapes. That you could, and as you read through the book, you will learn about multiple ways to get shapes and connect the shapes on the page. I'm going to show you one technique, and that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to activate the connector tool. I'm going to use my start shape, put it right here, and I'll zoom in just a touch so I can see the width of the page here. It's good enough. And the next thing I need is a process shape. So what this by the way, this beginning shape and this start and end shape, what that means, that's the beginning and the end of the flow chart. And so those tell the viewer, people that use these kinds of drawings on a regular basis know that when they see this oval, okay, here's the start or here's the end. And then based on the arrows coming out of it or going into it, that tells you furthermore whether it's the beginning or the end. So my next thing I'm going to need is a process. And so I'm going to drag a process, just put it over here to the right. And because I have the connector tool active, it's going to automatically connect it for me. I need another process. Drag this guy, put him out here. Using my dynamic grid here, I'm getting my spacing set up for me. Need another one here. And need another process. There's my fourth process. From my fourth process, what I'm actually going to do, I'm going to now put a document, all right? And so from the document here, I drag this guy and drop it. And we'll talk about the document in just a moment. Now what I need to do, I need to now place another process that follows this. And what that document shape indicates to the viewer is that at this step in our process that we're showing somebody, you would be able to look something up. It would be a manual or a reference book that you could look to for some guidance, and so that's what that document means. But because the next shape, the next process is supposed to follow this one, I'm going to go ahead and select that shape. I'll grab a process and put it out here, and because Visio knows I'm connecting to that one, it's going to go ahead and make my arrow for me. I'll need to adjust that in a minute, but for right now it's fine. I need another process. Drag it, put it out here to the right. There we go. And now I need what's called a decision shape, and it's a diamond decision. That's one helpful way to remember that. So I'm going to drag and drop my diamond shape, put it here, try and get my dynamic grid to tell me when yep, that looks good. And what this indicates is that a question is being asked. So at this point in this process, a question has to be answered yes or no. We have two more shapes to finish up our flow chart shapes here. The next is another process, so I'll put it right here. And then lastly, that one didn't, I put that one a little bit low. You can see that the line is kind of bent, so I'm going to just move that up just a touch until the line straightens out. And then lastly, our ending shape. Okay, so I'm going to take the end here and drop it right there. Now, I have all my shapes. I'm missing one line though. I need a line to go from this decision back to that process. And again, how do I know this? Because I'm looking at the picture on page 166. That's the product we're trying to draw. And so to get that connector to go from there to there, actually what I can do, I'm just going to go back to my pointer tool, and I'll hover over the top of this, and you'll see I have the north, south, east, west little arrows that appear. I'm just going to hover over the top, the bottom one. I'm going to left click and hold it, and I'm going to come back over to this point right here. And so I'll make that a little bit taller. So those are the lines I need. This line needs to be adjusted just a touch. I'd like for that to swing out around this document here. So I'm going to select that line, and I'll grab the endpoint for it and just move it to the end. And that looks good right there. So if I come out and I look at the whole thing now, I now have the shapes drawn on my page like they want us to draw them on, they're in the picture of 166. I'm going to move the whole thing over, select them all, just move over just a little bit, maybe down a little bit, because there's going to be a title as well. And there you go. So those are the shapes I want. And also to reinforce what you learned about titles earlier, I'm going to go to the Design tab, and you have these borders and titles, right? So I'm going to select one of these kind of pretty titles here. Select this urban one, put that on there, and I'll put for the name of this thing, Human Resources Recruiting Process. And just double it to get that modified. If I click up in here, nothing happens, right? Well, the reason I'm not getting into that is because look at the number of pages on our drawing. When we added that title, it added a background page for us. And so to get that modified, what you have to do, you have to go to that background page and then double click up in here, and then you can make the Human Resources Recruiting Process. Now, could you have made this drawing differently? Yes, you could. Absolutely. You could have added the individual shapes and then used the connector tool to one by one connect them, or you could have used the little auto connect features here to select shapes to add each one of these. How you build it is up to you. What I'm going to do for your homework assignments is tell you I want you to create this, and I'm going to give you a description or a snapshot of what I want. How you build it is up to you. You get that freedom to decide that. So that's one of the reasons I like this course, is I get to see your creativity. If I ask 10 of you to do the same task, typically I'll get 10 different products. Even if they look kind of similar at the end, the process that you follow to create that end thing is usually different, which I think speaks to our creative side, which is kind of cool. So that's that's how you get the shapes on the page. Now, how do you populate those shapes with the proper text? Easy enough. Let's go back to our home tab, and you've learned about this in chapters 2 and in chapters 3. You have a text tool, right? So if you have the text tool active and you select something, you automatically go into its text box, right? And so this is, and I may need to refer back to the individual pages here to get a little bit better snapshot of the actual text here. Here it is. If you go back to page 165, it gives you, in steps like 1, 2, and 3, it gives you the text that you need to put into the labels to put on these individual shapes. So I'm going to pause my recording. I'll get the text input here, and what I'm doing, I'm just going to have my text tool active, go from shape to shape to shape to shape, and get my text on here. So I'll meet you back here in just a moment. All right, I have done that. I have input the text. I went through on page 165 and read the labels that were supposed to be on these different shapes. And let's take a look at this, because this is a process. If you worked at a business, this is the process potentially that would be followed in order to hire somebody. And so it starts with this. Somebody in a department reports to HR. They say, hey, human resources, we need somebody. So a hiring need is reported. And somebody in human resources then logs that hiring request, and then the people back at the department presumably are going to prepare a job description and questions that should be asked of people that want the job, and then the human resources department then reach out through their marketing department, through public relations, to advertise that open position, and then people would apply for the job, and the people in human resources would interview candidates. Now this little document shape down here, what that refers to, those are the screening questions. We could have labeled that. We could have go ahead and just put screening questions, because the people in human resources aren't going to know exactly what to ask for the information technology department. So the people in that department come up with those questions, and then as the human resources personnel talk to the candidates, they can ask those appropriate questions, log the responses, and then send that information to the hiring managers over at the departments. Once the candidates have been interviewed, the department itself could then select a candidate, and human resources could then make a job offer, and then the candidate who has been extended an offer would have to either accept or deny that offer. If they denied it, then it would have to go back to the department again, and the department would need to pick somebody else for the job. If the candidate accepted that position, then they would be hired by human resources, and then the process would end. And so that's what this drawing shows you. It shows you the process of how this company hires people, or how a department tells human resources what they need, and then human resources follows a set procedure in order to find employees. And so that's the purpose of this drawing. So you can make flowcharts for just about anything. You can make a flowchart for how to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. You can make a flowchart for how to check a computer if you think it has a virus on it. I mean, think about any process that you could perform. You can flowchart that. And so that's the purpose of this kind of drawing. Now, you'll note as I explain this to you, I went through and I said HR does this, the department that needs somebody does this. These questions are written by somebody else, the hiring manager. And so this generic, traditional type of flowchart is good in that it shows a process, but there's another kind of flowchart called a cross-functional flowchart that's even better, because in the cross-functional flowchart, not only do we see this process, we also see who's involved in this process and who does what particular job. And so let's save this one. We drew this one from scratch, and so let's save this one, and then we'll create a cross-functional flowchart for the same process, but in that particular drawing, you're going to see additional information about who does what job on top of the jobs that are done. Okay, so I'm going to go to File and Save, and I'll just put this on my desktop. Save as. I'll just call this traditional flowchart. And I'll save it and close it. Now, the next kind of drawing, the cross-functional flowchart, let's work on that one. So I'm going to go back to Visio again. And for a picture of what you're going to create, it's also called a swim lane diagram. The finished product is on page 173. If you flip back to page 173, you'll see the finished picture of what we're going to create. And that should look familiar because we just drew the traditional flowchart in the same steps, but presented in a different way. And that we'll use that as our guide as we get started here. So we need we'll go to File and Categories. We're going to go to Flowchart, and we're looking for a cross-functional flowchart, a CFF. Again, it's also called a swim lane diagram. If you've ever been to a swim meet, you'll see that this looks like the swim lanes of a pool. Now, the swim lane, the swim drawing that they want us to draw is supposed to be horizontal versus vertical. This is vertical. To get this to change, all we have to do is go to this cross-functional flowchart conditional tab, and this is the first one of these tabs I think you've seen in this class. Now, this is a specific kind of drawing, and as a result, this tab only shows up when you open this kind of drawing. And so you'll see when you select the cross-functional flowchart tab of the ribbon up here, you get to choose whether the swim lane diagram is going to be a vertical one or a horizontal. I'm going to go horizontal, and it adjusts it for me. Now you'll also see that because the auto space or auto size feature is on, if I go to Design, you'll see that auto size is on, that it went ahead and threw an extra page on there. I really don't like that. I've talked to you about that. What I'm going to do, I'm going to go to the orientation for this. I'm going to make the orientation for this page landscape. And then I'll take this shape, take the whole thing actually, make sure I go to the Home tab, my pointer is ready, select the whole thing and just move this down the page. So there we go. So we've got the whole thing on a single page. A single page drawing is better. It's more desirable in my opinion. And so then I'll go back to design and I'll turn that auto size off so it doesn't do that to us anymore. So we have, we'll zoom in a touch here. We have the title that we'll add in here. We have the different departments that we'll be working with, and then we have the word phase over here. So we are lacking 2 different departments because there are 4 different entities involved in this particular process. We have the recruiter, we have human resources, we have the hiring manager, and we have the candidate who would presumably get the job. So let's add some swim lanes to this drawing. And so I made the shapes pane bigger, and you'll see for a cross-functional flow chart, the stencils that are available. If I come down to the cross-functional flow chart shape stencil, there are different shapes in here. One of those is a swim lane, so I'm going to drag a swim lane, just drop it, and I'll do another one right here. And so now I have 4 different lanes, and I can get rid of this. Actually, I'm going to need my shapes, right? I'm going to go to my basic flowchart shapes and try and get this to be as friendly as possible looking. Okay, so what we need to do is we now need to put our shapes and labels in here to show our process. Let's start with the title itself, and because this swim lane diagram, in this swim lane diagram, the title is incorporated in the swim lane diagram itself, as opposed to in the preceding example it was in a background page. So in this case we can just double click up in here and we can modify this title. And this is human resources, recruiting, swim lane diagram, and I need to correct that spelling there. Nope, we're good. Okay, so that's our title, and now what we need to do is change where it says function. What this is referring to is the functional areas, the departments, which you would be working with. So our recruiter is first, and you just type these in here. And I'm just double clicking to get into the text box. This is HR administration or HR admin. I'll zoom in so you can see this a little better. This one is the hiring manager, and this last one is the candidate. And so those are the people involved in our process, and now all we have to do is add the shapes to show who does what in the process. All right, so we're going to start. The hiring manager initiates this whole thing, so we zoom in just slightly. Primarily we're going to be working up here with these 3 for the most part. Once it gets to time to make a choice, we can include the candidate, but for the most part we'll be working with these top 3 lanes. So I'm going to take a start shape and drop it in here, and I'm going to then go and I'll activate the connector tool. So now my connector tool active. So the next shape is a process, and the human resource manager is the one who's going to log that hiring request, right? And this is the same exact process we went through a moment ago, but we're now telling who does what. So the next step is that the hiring manager then prepares a job description and screening questions. That's a process. Put that right there. And what you want to do is try to make sure that the shapes are all going to fit within the swim lane, because in this case we're trying to keep it on one page, and so if you space them out really far from one another, you end up running out of room. So, and then you have to squish everything back. So if you can kind of make them squishy in the beginning and then space them out, that's a little bit easier. The next process is to advertise the open job. That's going to happen through human resources administration, and we'll go with that right there. The recruiter would then interview candidates. So we've got a third-party recruiter that's involved. That's essentially a headhunter for us. And then once the headhunter has identified candidates, then we have to select a candidate, and that's done by the HR manager. So that comes down here, and we're trying to basically kind of keep things looking pretty. Then an offer needs to be made, and that offer would be made by the recruiter. See how this is jumping back and forth. Once an offer is made, then we get to the candidate, and the candidate has to accept or decline. So we go to the decision shape, and we add that down here. And at that point, the candidate is going to make a yes or no decision. Our next shape is going to be the assumption that they accepted the offer, so we need to hire the candidate and then end. So we're going to go with hire the candidate, which will be done by the recruiter. And then lastly, we'll end that process back at the hiring manager. And it barely fit there. I actually need to move these over just a touch to make it look as good as I'd want to. So those are the shapes. Now we also need to get I'm going to go back to the pointer tool. If the candidate says no, we have to go back to select another candidate. So I'm going to, again, same process as before. Zoom in here just a touch. I'm going to hover over with the pointer tool active, I'll hover over the decision shape. You get the north, south, east, west window arrows that show up. I'm just going to hover over the top, this one right here, and then left click and hold it and drag up to this shape. And so there are all my arrows. Now I just need to label everything, and the labeling process is the same exact that you saw in the preceding example, the other flowchart. I would also move these arrows just slightly. For example, I'd take this one and move it up here, and then the other one adjusted for me. You can move that over just a touch if you wanted to, and that's the process. And so I'll go ahead and pause this, jump into my text tool. I'm going to go to the text tool and get the text onto these shapes, and you'll see this finished product. Check. Okay, I've put my labels in here, and I would do a little bit more cleanup here before I turn this. Like if I were you and I were trying to turn this in for a grade, I would get, make sure that all the entries for this hiring manager were centered up. If we zoom in here, look closely at the arrows, and by the way, one of the most common mistakes made on any type of flow chart from my students is when they start working with decision shapes, they frequently forget to label the yes and no paths. You have a question here: does the candidate accept? And the answer is either going to be no or yes. The answers are always no or yes in a flow chart. And so, if you don't put the yes or no labels on there, your flow chart is it's not correct, because basically, we don't know what the answer was as the viewer looks at this and as the process proceeds. As we look at this example here, we'll see that the text block for yes is right next to this ending shape, and that's it's not wrong, it's not incorrect, but that's not probably the best placement for that text block, because we've got this other shape right next to it. We have a lot of real estate in here that we could utilize to make better presentation of that yes. So how would you modify that? Well, think back to that lesson you had back from chapter 2 or 3 where we were working with text blocks. Select that shape, go to your text block tool, this one right here, and then just move it. Take it and move it up to where it's out of the way. Or you could even orient it. You've got the ability to orient it so that it's following the path itself. And so I would also either make the lanes a little bit wider, see if we can get all of them at once, and you went ahead and did that for me. And let me get this shape and just get that moved over just a touch, and then I think that's going to look better. So as you look at this product, this is a cross-functional flow chart, and it's a type of flow chart showing a process just like the one that you guys saw in the first example, but this one is even better because it shows us the players, the people involved in this process, and we get to see who's making which decisions and the order in which they make them. So this is a cross-functional flow chart. All right, good. So let's save this. Let's do a file and save as. We'll just save this as CFF for cross-functional flowchart. And next, what we want to work with is an organization chart. I'm going to close this drawing. And an organization chart is a picture which shows the people that work at an organization. It's basically the hierarchy of employees, starting with the highest ranking person, the president or CEO or chairman of the board, and then from there, like a family tree, basically coming down and showing who works for who. That's what an organization chart is. And if you've ever had to make an organization chart in Microsoft Word or PowerPoint, I believe you'll be ecstatic when you see this tool in Visio, because Visio's organization chart tool is tremendous. Make a very pretty document, and it's super easy. And so we're going to create organization charts two ways. We're going to do it manually, and then we're going to come back through and we're going to do it in an automated fashion. And the automated fashion is really, really cool. That's why you have this spreadsheet, this org chart data start. We'll come back to that in a moment, but let's just open up Visio, go to the organization chart type of drawing, that template, and let me show you how you'd make one from scratch. We can do that just literally in just a couple of minutes here. So let me open up Visio. If you're in your book, you'll look at like page 173 through 179, all the way through 173 through 179. And so let me go to the File tab and New, and I'm going to go to Categories. This is a type of business drawing. So I'm going to click on Business Drawing category, and you'll see that we come down here to the O's, there's an organization chart and an organization chart wizard. And you know the wizard one has like a little magic wand on it, think of like Harry Potter. We don't want that one yet. We're just going to do organization chart. So if we select organization chart, select your type of units, hit create, and it opens it up. This is the blank canvas for us. These are the stencils that are part of this type of drawing, and we're going to begin by putting the highest ranking person at the top of the drawing. So if this were a military unit, this would be like the general or the commander of the unit, right? And so as you look at these available shapes, you'll see that these different shapes represent different levels of seniority, if you will. The highest ranking shape that you have available is the executive belt, and so I'm going to take the executive belt and drop that out here. And I'll zoom in here just a little bit. This is just a shape like you've worked in the past, like with the flow charting stuff. These are just little text blocks on here. So if you wanted to get in here and change the title, this is like, let's say the president. And let me zoom into where you can actually see that. So that's the president right there. Let me spell it correctly. And we'll say their name is going to be Gary Ransdell. So if I come back out from there a little bit, you'll see that shape is going to look different than let's go to a manager shape, because the next highest ranking shape is the manager belt, so the executive belt, manager belt. And in order to make somebody the subordinate to a shape that you have on your page, all you have to do is just drop that shape on top of it. So I'm going to drop the manager on top of the president, and we'll call this person the VP of recruiting, and we'll say that that's going to be John Doe. And let's say there's another manager we want to put. Well, again, to make a person that works for us a superior, all you have to do is just drop them on top of that shape, and it connects them for you. Really handy. So you'll see that these manager shapes look different than the executive shape, right? The next available position, next different type of position, is a position belt. So I'm going to drop some positions on top of these managers. Now you'll see that it might be a little bit difficult in the video to see this, but this is a different shade of blue than the manager. And when we start to apply what are called themes in a minute, it's going to be very dramatic, very, very apparent that this shape is different than that shape. And that's important, because what we want to do is essentially create this graphic that shows the different echelons of the employees. And so you want to be very very easily you want to look at the diagram and say, oh, this guy and this guy, they're peers, and this guy over here is a manager, and this guy is the most highest ranking is the highest ranking person that you can possibly be at this organization. You also have assistant positions, and I'll go ahead and put an assistant to the president because let's say the president has some sort of executive administrative assistant, right? So we'll drop that assistant on there, and that's one way that you could do that. Another, and yeah, let's leave it like that. And so I'm going to call this see the executive, because when we put a theme on here, we're going to call this Greg Stumbo. I'm just trying to think out names here. And so when we put a theme on here, this is going to look different. Right now it's looking real similar to the positions down here, but that will have a different look and feel. So you'll know that that's a different type of employee than the position here. Also, there are vacancies. Let's say that for the VP of recruiting right now, he has 2 vacancies in his department. Look what a vacancy looks like. You can see that obviously this one is different than these other guys because there's no picture. If it's a vacant position, you're not going to have a picture of somebody because nobody's working there, right? And so if you wanted to add your employees one by one, this is a way that you could do this through this manual process of dropping people. Now, let's go to this person over here. We can add multiple jobs at once. So for example, we have like staff positions as well. So let's say there are like 3 student workers that work for this person right here. I'm going to take the staff belt, drop it right here, and there's a staff person right there, and you see that looks different than the position right there. You can do multiple shapes. So I'm going to drop multiple shapes on here, and it's going to say how many shapes do you want? I'm going to say because I need 2 more staff positions. We have a total of 3 different student workers that work for this one person, and it puts those in there. So I now have these different staff positions working for this individual right there. Okay, so that's if you're going to do it by hand. These are the tools you would use, the shapes that you would use to create the individuals working there. Please note that the consultant belt also looks different. I'm going to go ahead and drop a consultant here, and let me go ahead and change the theme because I want you to see how these guys look different. And by the way, like you can see, I'm starting to get to the bottom of the page here. To arrange this, I can just real easily grab the top person, just move it up a little touch, and everything comes with it. If I move to the left, everybody moves to the left. Move to the right. So that's kind of an easy way to start to adjust the look of the page. You can also, if you wanted to modify the layout of the employees, let's say instead of having it like one on top of the other, if you wanted the subordinates to be like right next to each other, you can do that. Select the subordinate person on this organization chart or org chart conditional tab. This is the second one of these that you've seen in our class so far. On the far left under layout, you have this drop down box, and you can go to layout. You can say, hey, I want the people in this one to show up like let's see, actually what I'm looking for is this right here, side by side. And so it changes that look. Now I've started to get into this person's space over here. How could I fix that? Well, what I would do is I'd take this one guy and I would just sort of move him to the left, and he's going to get out of the way of these other people right here. So you have tremendous control over the look and the layout of these individuals in your drawing. And how are you going to learn how to do that? Well, you're just going to have to experiment with it and just try it out. Let's take a look at these different shapes that you can use, these different themes, if you will. So I really like this one a lot, this pip one. I'm going to go to pip and it's going to apply this different look, and you can see that by doing that, the chief, the president, has 4 dots. These managers have 3 dots. Positions have 2. This assistant right down here has 1. These staff people don't have any dots, and so and I did rearrange my so that like the side-by-side stuff I did, I'd have to redo that one. That's a bummer. But so get your shape decided first. Whatever you're going to use with that first. Here's another pretty expressive shape scheme, because it shows you pretty clearly that there are different levels or different types of jobs. Now on top of this, if we go to what's called the Design tab, and we then go to the themes and we start to apply different themes here, it's going to also put different colors. So very quickly you can see that, and there are many themes down here. I'm just experimenting here. And then within each theme you have different variations that you could apply, but you can see that there are green colors, there are tan colors, there are purple colors, there are some with no colors, and so from that you can very quickly discern that there are different types of employees here. And so that's how you would build a org chart from scratch. All right, and are you going to do that on a regular basis? Maybe. If it's just a real quick and dirty, you're trying to put something together for a meeting that's coming up, great way to do it. If you're trying to build an organization chart for a whole bunch of people, we're probably going to use the wizard. That's what we'll look at next. So let me go ahead and save this, and I'll save this on my computer on the desktop. I'll call this handmade org chart. So let me close that guy up, and next what we want to do, let's go what I want you to do now is look at the Excel spreadsheet that you downloaded from the helpful hyperlinks page that I provide through Blackboard. If you look at this Excel spreadsheet, this is a listing of many employees. You'll see in our example here there are 28 employees at this particular company. This is the say the XYZ company, and there are different employees here. We have their names, we have their titles, we have a column which tells us who each person reports to, we have their employee numbers as well as their phone extensions. And so as you look at this, you can see, okay, hey, look, Michael LaPlane works for Elise Boland, and Elise Boland is the manager of something, and she reports to John Marshall, and John Marshall is the vice president who reports to Art Helmers, and Art Helmers is the president. Please note as you look at this spreadsheet, Art Helmers reports to no one. He is the top dog, and this is really important. When you have a data source, and you can import when you're going to build an organization chart from a data source, you're going to typically do that from an Excel spreadsheet or a database of some sort. The person who is your top dog, your boss, is going to report to nobody. Okay, and also note that when it says who they report to, it has a full name, and that name matches exactly. If we put John M here, or we put Johnny Marshall, when we try to import this or basically create a org chart from this in Visio is going to freak out because it's looking for exact name matches. So Amy Augustino, that has to match up exactly with whatever her name is over here. What I will frequently do when I ask students to do this assignment is I'll give you a spreadsheet, and under the reports to column I'll just give you job titles. So I'll have like vice president of, instead of having like John Marshall, I would, instead of listing John Marshall, I'd put VP of sales. And when you look at the data source, because you're a human, you look at that and you say, oh, it's VP of sales. Oh, that happens to be John Marshall. You know what that is. But we give the computer way too much credit, and the computer doesn't realize, oh, that's not somebody's name, that's their title, and it can't make that transition. So if I give you a data source for a homework assignment where in the reports to column it has job titles as opposed to names, what you have to do is you have to jump into the data source and actually correct that and make it into something that Visio can understand. Very common mistake that students make in a class, and I do that on purpose because your data sources will frequently not match up exactly with what the import process wants in a software program, and you have to be able to understand. You need to understand what Visio is actually looking for in that import process, and then you have to clean up your data your data source so that it matches up for that import process. And so that's a real world problem that happens a lot. So I try to throw that at you and try and trip you up as you work. All right, so you see this. I'm going to close this up now. Another important thing, when you're going to do this import process, when you're going to have Visio build an org chart for all of these people for you automatically, the data source needs to be closed. And so I'm going to close this file. If that's open while I try to build the organization chart, from it, it will fail. And so I'm going to make sure that it is closed. And I'm going to go to Visio. And this time I'll go to a file new, categories. It's a business diagram. By the way, this process is described step by step, starting on page 180 in your textbook. So I'm going to come down here to the organization chart wizard. Think of Harry Potter and his magic wand, right? So I'm going to go org chart wizard, and I'm going to use US units. It's going to say, okay, where is my data source? Where is the source of information from which I can then make an org chart for you? And so I have to tell it the information you need is already stored in a file or in a database. Or in our case, it's in a file. And I have to tell it what kind of file. Is it a Microsoft Exchange database? Is it some sort of Excel file? Is what we want? Is it some other ODBC, compliant sort of data source? Let's say it's like a CSV file or something. What we want is this Excel file choice. It's the middle one. Then I have to browse out to where that file is located. In this case, it's on my desktop. Yours may be, wherever you use storage. It could be in your download folders, wherever you put it. So I'm going to go to my desktop. I believe I have this in the Visio student files for Chapter 4. There's my org chart data start. And I have to specify a language. Hit next. It's going to look at that file and it's going to say, okay. Because this is a textbook and a textbook example, all the column names match up. But what it's saying is what is the name of the person, when you're looking at your data source, what column in there actually provides the name. So as you click on this, you'll see that these different choices correspond to those column headings that you saw in Excel a moment ago. In my case, in this example, everybody's name is in the name column. And as far as the reports to, everybody's boss's name is listed in that reports to column. So I can just leave those as they are. What you might see in homework assignments is you might see, instead of having a reports to, you'd have to drop down and find the boss, who is the boss folder, who's the boss column heading or something like that. And you'd have to make those corrections like I mentioned a moment ago to make sure they say names instead of titles. So as far as first name goes, you can actually have a data source where it lists first names and last names. So you could designate this maybe as the last name and this is the first name. But as it stands right there, we are good to go with our example. We'll go to our next step. And here what it's saying, okay, what do you want to display on the screen? What do you want to show up in this organization chart that I create for you? And by default, it's going to put their name and their title. Okay, what if you also wanted to include what their phone number was? Well, you can use the extension and add that. So that would be like the third thing listed. So in addition to their name and then their title, their phone number would show up. If you didn't want something, you could remove it. Let's say you didn't want the title, but you wanted the phone number. That's how you use this interface right here. I'll go with the name and the title. That'll be fine. And note that you can move things up. Like let's add that extension back in there. But you can move the extension above the title. You can add that. And this should feel like Microsoft Access. If you've ever had, CIS 243 and you work with Access, man, you're working with an Access database. That's what you're doing. This is the Access interface for sure. Okay, so I'm going to have the title and the name displayed on the screen. Go to next. It's going to say, okay, in addition to what's displayed on the screen, do you want me to bring in some data so you can have additional data fields available later on? Well, sure, that's fine. I'm going to go ahead and include all of it. and add that over there. And what that's saying is, in the little database that gets created with this drawing, you could have additional stuff that would be at your fingertips if you wanted to use it. It's not going to show up on the screen unless you turn it on and use it, but in some cases you won't need that, in some cases you may. It's going to make the file size bigger, so think about what your needs are, but this step is essentially asking, what do you want to include as a data field, whether it's displayed on the screen or not, what do you want to include as a data field. I'm going to hit next, and it's going to say, do you want to include pictures in your org chart? At this point I'm going to say no. I'm going to say don't include pictures because I want to show you how to add those at a later date. If you wanted to include the pictures from the get-go, you would click here and then browse out to your folder of pictures. So I'm going to say don't include right now and hit next. And I'm going to let the wizard automatically build my chart for me, and if it needs to, it can break my my chart across pages as necessary. What is the top of the page? Where do you want to be at the top of the page? You get to choose either an individual or the top executive. The default choice is top executive. I'm going to go with that one, and then I'm going to leave these two boxes checked for hyperlink employees shapes and synchronize employee shapes. All right, and I'm going to hit finish. And then what it's going to do is going to go bop, 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 and it's going to reach out to my data source. It's going to make this chart for all 38 people for me. And there is a chart with all of those different employees. And instead of me having to one by one add those and type all their names in, let me zoom in here so you can see this. There's Amy Augusto, she's a vice president. There's the manager. There's David Parker. There's Sandra, and so on. And so it's really cool automated way to create that source. And you'll see that it's a 3-page document at this point. Let me next show you how to add photos, because I want to add multiple. We've got this. Let's go back to our stuff that you downloaded. You had this zip file that you unzipped to show the folder, all the different people, right? Well, there's a picture for every single person in our drawing. It just is because we have a good sample file here. Go back to Visio here. If we are in an org chart tab, if we come over to I'm going to select the chief here, the head person. I'm going to go to insert multiple pictures. Again, if you don't have anything selected at all on a thing, you don't get that choice. Well, you do actually. So you go to multiple pictures, and what you have to do is tell the program, hey, where are these multiple pictures? And what it's going to do is it's going to look for name matches. The names of the pictures have to exactly match the people in your org chart. So I'm going to go to my desktop, and in that Visio student files folder for Chapter 4, actually it's on my desktop just by itself. I have the photos. There it is. Hit open. It's going to look for all 28 people, and it found them. And as I zoom in here, you'll see those are the picture files for those individuals. Now you could have done that one by one, but because our names match up, it's faster to just go through and let Visio add them all at one time. That's pretty handy. Let me zoom back out to the whole page thing and go back to that these shapes here. Let's go back with this one. This was a pretty good one. This panel one was pretty good. It's going to apply this new look for us. And as we zoom in here, you'll get to see, look, here's the top dog. He looks different than the managers. And if I do other things like add, let's go to design and put one of these themes on here again. Let's go with this theme right here. You'll start to see these color differences between the different types of positions, these different variations, for example. It's pretty easy to see that there are different echelons of worker, and if you don't like that look, then you could switch it up again from that org chart. You've got those different looks. And so let me go back to the whole thing here. We're just about done. Keep hanging in there with me because we're almost done here. All right, to finish this up, I'm going to show you something called a synchronized copy. Actually, I'm going to do two things. I'm going to also throw a background on here and a title, and then I'm going to do the synchronized copy. All right, and the reason I'm going to do that, the background and the title now, is because when I make the synchronized copy, if I do the background and title now, when I do the synchronized copy in a moment, it will, all that formatting and pretty stuff will go with the will follow will be created on the subsequent pages for me instead of me having to do it over and over again. So let me first go to the Design tab. You've seen this before. We have the different backgrounds, right? I'm going to go with let's go with this kind of pretty background because of a corner gradient. We'll call it that. And you'll see that this is actually 6 different pages. You know, if I go back to no background again, you'll see this is 6 different pages, and that's way too big. If I wanted to print this out, you know, that's going to be a massive, like poster board side of thing. I don't want a poster board size drawing. I want a single page. So I'm going to break this down by what's called a synchronized copy. But before I do that, let me go ahead and put this pretty background on here. I'll go with this corner gradient. That's there. That looks nice. I'm going to then I'm going to zoom in, and you'll see that there are multiple managers here. You have Amy Augustino. Many of the people work for her. And many of the other people work for John Marshall. And so what I can do, I'm going to select Amy Augustino by right-clicking. I'm going to right-click, and there's a choice to create a synchronized copy. All right. So again, how did I get that? I'm going to right-click the main person I want to create the synchronized copy for. I'm going to create a synchronized copy, and this is really important. Check this out. I'm going to check this box to hide subordinates on original page. And I'm going to have it create this new page for her and her subordinates on a new page. All right, I'm going to hit OK. It thinks about it, and there's the new page right there. And if I go back to page 1, you can see that it's greatly reduced in size because as we zoom in here and look at Amy now, there's this new little shape down here in the lower corner. And what that indicates to the viewer is that there is a synchronized copy page with her subordinates. All right, so let me do the same thing over here for John. I'm going to right-click John Marshall, create a synchronized copy. Again, I will hide the subordinates on this page, let it make a new page for John and his subordinates. Hit OK. Visio does its thing, creates the synchronized copy page over here. I go back to page 1, and if I look at the whole drawing now, we can get this, relay this out to where it's starting to come down to a single page and be a prettier drawing. And so this is a thing I want you guys to be comfortable with. Then what we'd do is we'd go back to these subordinate pages for page 2, and we would arrange this so that it's not so large. We might even make subordinate pages for each of these managers. So what I like when I have an organization chart, what I like for my students to do is create it to where each page has you know, I don't want you spanning multiple pages. So we can and I'll be very specific. I'll say on this page I want the senior leadership. On the next page I want all the people from the sales department. From the next page I want everybody from the accounting department. From the next page I want everybody from human resources. And as such, what you'll be able to do is you'll be able to create a drawing that matches up with what I want. So if we wanted to try and relay this out, if we select a shape, if we go back to our layouts here, layout choices, we can, you know, work with this with these menus up here and do all sorts of modifications to it. So I think that's it. Will you learn how to use this stuff? Well, you need to work with it, and you need to read the book. You've watched this video, and you need to experiment and do these things on your own on your computer. Everything that's in the book has been, I've showed you everything that's in the book. I've showed you some additional stuff as well. Some other things that you can do, you can create hyperlinks back and forth between the pages. For example, if you wanted to have a hyperlink so that somebody could go automatically from Amy's page back to the home page, and from the home page back to Amy's page. You could insert those sorts of things. We'll cover that in a later chapter. But those are things that we do with these org charts. So I hope you've enjoyed it. Thanks for your time and attention. This was a long lesson. Thanks for your work. Have a good day.